Michael was an ordinary man who lived a calm and quiet life. He worked hard during the week at his office, came home in the evenings to his small but comfortable house, and enjoyed simple routines. He wasn't the type of person who looked for trouble. In fact, most people who knew him described him as gentle, polite, and patient. That was why what happened to him at Walmart that day felt so unfair, like the universe had suddenly decided to test his strength. It all began with a blender. Michael had bought the blender just a week ago. He had been excited because he loved making smoothies in the morning before work. But after only 2 uses, the motor burned out, leaving the machine useless. At first, Michael was disappointed, but he wasn't angry. He believed things like this happened sometimes. Products could fail, and that was why stores allowed returns. With the receipt in hand and the box carefully packed, he drove to the nearest Walmart on a Saturday morning. The parking lot was already busy, filled with cars and shopping carts scattered here and there. Michael parked his car, stepped out, and walked toward the big sliding glass doors. The air smelled faintly of fried food from the snack stand outside, and the sound of carts rolling across the pavement echoed all around. He took a deep breath and reminded himself this would be a simple errand. He had the receipt, the box, and a calm attitude. Nothing could possibly go wrong. Inside, Walmart buzzed with activity. Families moved up and down the aisles. Kids pointed at toys, and elderly shoppers compared prices on shelves. Michael moved through the crowd until he reached the customer service counter. The line was longer than he expected. Several people were already waiting with items in hand. Some with clothes, some with electronics, and others with groceries they wanted to return. Michael joined the line, holding his small bag close. The blender wasn't heavy, but the bag felt heavier than usual because of the responsibility it carried. All he wanted was a fair exchange or refund. While he stood in line, he noticed the woman behind him. She looked to be in her late 40s, dressed neatly, but with an expression that seemed permanently sharp. Her lips pressed tightly together, and her eyes darted around as if searching for something wrong. She carried only a purse, no items to return. Yet she was in the line, impatiently tapping her foot on the tiled floor. Michael gave her a polite smile, but she didn't smile back. Instead, she sighed loudly and said, "Some people really waste everyone's time with returns." Michael wasn't sure if she was talking to herself or to him. He chose not to respond. He didn't want to start an argument with a stranger. The line moved slowly. One customer argued with the cashier about a refund, and the manager had to step in. Another customer took time searching for their receipt. Michael remained patient. He believed waiting in line was just part of life. Finally, after nearly 15 minutes, it was his turn. He stepped forward, placed the bag on the counter, and greeted the young woman behind the register. She smiled warmly. "Good morning, sir. How can I help you today?" Michael explained politely. "I bought this blender last week. It stopped working after only 2 uses. I have the receipt right here. I would like to return it, please." The cashier nodded, took the receipt, and scanned the box. Everything seemed normal. She asked a few questions, like whether he wanted a replacement or a refund. Michael said he preferred a refund, and she agreed to process it. But before the transaction could be finished, the woman behind him suddenly spoke loudly. "This is ridiculous," she said, her voice sharp enough to turn heads nearby. "People like him are always trying to scam stores. He probably broke the blender on purpose just to get money back." Michael froze. His hands tightened slightly around the counter. He looked back at her in surprise. "I beg your pardon?" he asked softly. The woman stepped closer, glaring at him. "I know your type. Buying things, using them, and then bringing them back when you're done. It's dishonest and you're wasting everyone's time." The cashier looked uncomfortable. She tried to calm the situation. "Ma'am, he has a receipt and this is a normal return. Everything is fine." But the woman wasn't convinced. Her voice grew louder. "No, everything is not fine. This man is committing fraud. I'm going to call the police." Michael's heart skipped a beat. "What?" "That's not true," he said, trying to keep his voice steady. "I'm just returning a defective product. That's all." But she had already pulled out her phone. Right there in the middle of Walmart with dozens of people watching, she dialed 911. "Hello?" "Yes, I need police at Walmart right now," she said into the phone, speaking dramatically. "There's a man here threatening staff and trying to steal from the store." Michael's mouth went dry. He felt every eye in the customer service area staring at him. Whispers spread through the crowd. Some people stepped back as if he were dangerous. The cashier immediately shook her head, waving her hands. That's not true. He hasn't done anything wrong, but the woman ignored her. She kept talking on the phone, describing Michael in detail, as if she were reporting a dangerous criminal. Michael felt a heavy weight press down on his chest. He had never been in trouble with the law before. The thought of police officers arriving, possibly believing her lies, filled him with fear. He glanced around helplessly, searching for someone who might defend him. Another employee, the store manager, approached quickly. He had overheard part of the commotion. "Sir, are you all right?" he asked Michael. Michael nodded nervously. "Yes, I just wanted to return this blender. That's all." The manager turned to the woman. "Ma'am, please lower your voice. He has a receipt, and I already approved this return. There's no problem here." But the woman waved her free hand dismissively. "You don't know what you're dealing with. People like him take advantage of kind employees. I won't stand by and watch." Michael's legs felt weak. He wanted to defend himself more strongly, but part of him was too shocked. How could someone accuse him of theft right in front of everyone without even knowing him? A mother holding her child nearby whispered, "Is he dangerous?" Another man in line shook his head and muttered, "This is getting out of hand." The minutes stretched endlessly as the woman continued her call. Michael stood silently, his heart racing, his palms sweaty against the counter. The store no longer felt like a safe place. It felt like a stage where he was being humiliated in front of strangers. Finally, the woman ended her call with the words, "Yes, send someone quickly." She slipped her phone back into her purse and crossed her arms. Her expression carried a strange satisfaction, as though she believed she had done something heroic. Michael couldn't believe it. He looked at the cashier, who looked equally stunned. "Don't worry, sir," she whispered to him. "The police will understand. You've done nothing wrong." But that did little to calm him. He knew that when officers arrived, they would have to ask questions. They might even suspect him at first, all because of one woman's false story. As he stood there waiting, Michael realized this wasn't just about a blender anymore. It was about his dignity, his reputation, and the way a single voice filled with lies could drown out the truth. And that was only the beginning. The minutes after Karen's phone call stretched endlessly for Michael. He stood at the counter, his defective blender sitting quietly in its box, as if mocking the chaos surrounding it. All he wanted was a simple refund. But now he felt like a suspect under invisible chains. The whispers from strangers cut into him like sharp edges, each one filled with judgment, each one pushing him deeper into humiliation. The cashier stayed near him, her young face pale with worry. She wanted to reassure him, but her voice was small compared to the loud accusations Karen had thrown into the air. The store manager also stood close, arms folded, clearly frustrated by the scene, yet waiting for the situation to unfold. And then, the sound came, the wail of sirens, faint at first, then louder as police vehicles pulled up outside the store. The sliding doors opened and 2 officers stepped inside, their uniforms crisp, their presence commanding immediate attention. The crowd parted slightly, giving them room as they approached the customer service counter. Karen straightened her back, her eyes gleaming with a strange pride. She pointed a finger at Michael the way a teacher might point at a misbehaving child. "That's him," she announced loudly. "That's the man I called about. He threatened staff and he's trying to steal from the store. Arrest him!" Michael felt his knees weaken. His throat tightened as though invisible hands were pressing against it. Arrest him for what? He hadn't done anything wrong. He looked at the officers, hoping they would see the truth in his eyes. The taller officer stepped forward. His voice was calm, professional. "Sir, we received a call. We need to ask you a few questions. Can you step aside with us?" Michael swallowed hard, nodding. "Of course, officer. I have nothing to hide." He followed them a few steps away from the counter, though he felt every pair of eyes drilling into his back. The humiliation burned inside him. He had never been the center of attention in such a negative way before. To be treated like a criminal in front of so many strangers was almost unbearable. "Sir, can you explain what happened here?" the officer asked. Michael held out the receipt with slightly trembling hands. "I came to return this blender. It stopped working after 2 uses. I have the receipt and the store accepted the return. That's all. I didn't threaten anyone. I didn't try to steal." The officer took the receipt, examined it, and then glanced at the box. "Do you have identification with you?" "Yes, officer. Michael handed over his driver's license. His hands felt sweaty, but he forced himself to remain calm. Meanwhile, Karen couldn't keep quiet. She moved closer, speaking loudly so everyone could hear. "Don't believe him!" "He's lying. He was yelling at the employees and trying to get money he doesn't deserve. I was standing right here the whole time." The other officer turned to the cashier. "Ma'am, is this true?" The cashier shook her head firmly. "No, sir." He was calm the whole time. He explained politely. He showed me his receipt. There was no yelling, no threats. He didn't do anything wrong. The manager stepped in as well, his voice steady and confident. "I approve the return myself." He followed the rules. "This woman is exaggerating." Karen's face darkened. She crossed her arms and spoke even louder. "Of course they're covering for him. He's tricking them. That's what scammers do. I called you because someone needs to stop him before he does it again." Michael closed his eyes for a brief second, trying to steady his breathing. He wanted to shout at her to demand she stop lying, but he held back. Raising his voice would only make him look guilty. Instead, he whispered softly, almost to himself, "Why are you doing this?" The officer handed Michael back his license and receipt. "Sir, from what we've heard, it seems you haven't done anything wrong. But we had to respond to the call. You're free to go." Relief washed over Michael like a wave, but the sting of humiliation remained. The police may have believed him, but the damage was already done. Dozens of strangers had watched the scene unfold, had listened to Karen's accusations, and many of them would walk away believing some part of her story. Karen, however, didn't look satisfied. She scoffed and muttered under her breath loud enough for Michael to hear, "They'll regret letting you go. People like you always cause trouble sooner or later." Michael picked up his bag with the refunded money tucked safely inside. He didn't say another word. He didn't trust his voice. He only wanted to escape the stares, the whispers, and the sharp eyes of the woman who had turned his ordinary morning into a public nightmare. As he walked toward the exit, he heard bits of conversations from those around him. Maybe he really was innocent. Still, why would she call the police if nothing happened? Poor guy. He looked so scared. Every word sank into Michael's heart, heavy and painful. Outside, the sunlight felt harsh instead of warm. The parking lot stretched before him, but his car felt miles away. Each step was slow, weighed down by the thought that his reputation, at least in the eyes of those who had witnessed the event, was now tainted. He reached his car, opened the door, and sat down. For a moment, he just sat there, gripping the steering wheel, staring at nothing. His reflection in the rearview mirror looked pale, almost ghostly. "How could this happen?" he whispered. The world had always seemed fair to him. If you followed the rules, if you treated people with respect, you would be treated fairly in return. That belief had carried him through life. But now, one stranger's false words had nearly destroyed his peace. It shook his trust in people. He drove home slowly, each red light giving him time to replay the scene in his head. Karen's pointing finger, her sharp voice, the crowd's judgment, the police arriving. Even though he had been cleared, it all felt like a scar that wouldn't fade quickly. When he arrived home, his house looked the same as always. Quiet, safe, welcoming. But as he stepped inside, it didn't feel the same. The memory of the morning clung to him, making the walls feel smaller, the silence heavier. He sat at his kitchen table, the place where he had once hoped to enjoy smoothies every morning. The refund money sat in an envelope beside him, but instead of satisfaction, he felt emptiness. He thought of Karen's face, her certainty, her eagerness to tear him down. Why had she chosen him? Why had she decided to believe the worst? The more he thought about it, the more he realized the danger of her actions. She had made a false report to the police. She had humiliated him in front of strangers. And worst of all, she didn't seem done. The look in her eyes had promised more trouble to come. That night, Michael couldn't sleep. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the flashing red and blue lights, heard Karen's voice shouting, and felt the stares of the crowd. He tossed and turned, the weight of unfairness pressing against his chest. The truth had saved him once. The cashier and manager had defended him. The police had believed him. But what if Karen didn't stop? What if she decided to attack him in another way? Michael sat up in bed, staring at the shadows on the wall. For the first time in years, he felt unsafe in his own skin, and deep inside he feared this was only the beginning of something much bigger than a broken blender. Michael tried to push away the painful memory of what happened at Walmart. He told himself it was over, that the police had seen the truth and that life would soon return to normal. But deep in his heart, he knew Karen was not finished with him. Her sharp eyes, her proud smirk, and her bitter words lingered like a storm cloud waiting to break again. For the next 2 days, Michael avoided leaving the house except for work. At the office, he worked quietly, pretending everything was fine, though his mind often drifted back to the moment Karen pointed at him in front of the whole store. He still felt the sting of humiliation, and sometimes when he closed his eyes, he heard her voice shouting fraud and arrest him. On the 3rd day, as he returned home from work, he noticed something unusual. A white envelope had been slipped under his front door. At first, he thought it was junk mail or a flyer from a local business. But when he picked it up and opened it, his stomach tightened. It was a letter from the Homeowners Association, the HOA that governed his neighborhood. The letter was formal, filled with cold sentences and official language. It stated that a complaint had been made about his public behavior and that his actions may reflect poorly on the reputation of the community. The letter ended with a request for him to appear at the next HOA meeting to address the complaint. Michael dropped the letter on his kitchen table and sat down heavily in his chair. His hands trembled slightly as he held his head in them. He didn't need to guess who had made the complaint. He already knew. Karen, he whispered bitterly. The realization hit him harder than the scene at Walmart. It wasn't enough for her to accuse him in public. Now she was trying to attack him in his own neighborhood, his place of peace, his home. Michael looked around his house. The walls, once comforting, now seemed fragile. If the HOA believed Karen's lies, could they really take away his right to live here? The thought filled him with dread. That evening, Michael walked outside to clear his head. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the neatly cut lawns of his neighborhood. Children laughed as they played on their bikes, and neighbors watered their gardens. Life here was usually quiet, almost too quiet. But tonight, he noticed something different. People's eyes on him. Across the street, a couple who usually waved at him turned away quickly. A man walking his dog paused, looked at Michael, then hurried on without greeting him. Even the friendly woman 2 houses down, who always smiled when she saw him, seemed hesitant, her smile fading before it fully appeared. The whispers had begun. Michael's chest tightened. He wanted to shout that none of it was true, that he had done nothing wrong. But shouting would only make him look desperate. So he stayed silent, walking back to his porch, his head heavy with worry. Later that night, as he sat at his desk, he decided he could not stay passive. If Karen was determined to destroy his reputation, he needed to defend himself. He pulled out the receipt, the refund slip, and the small note the Walmart manager had given him as confirmation. He carefully placed them into a folder. He also wrote down everything that had happened that day. The words Karen shouted, the presence of the cashier and manager as witnesses, and the way the officers had cleared him. If he had to stand before the HOA, he would bring the truth with him. But as the days passed, Karen's presence seemed to grow stronger. Michael began noticing her more often around the neighborhood. She walked past his house deliberately, sometimes pausing to glance at his yard with disapproval. Once, he caught her speaking to another neighbor, gesturing toward his home as though telling a story. When he approached, the conversation stopped abruptly, and both women looked at him with stiff expressions. Michael returned inside, his heart sinking deeper each time. He had lived in this neighborhood for years, quietly, peacefully. He paid his dues, kept his lawn trimmed, and followed every rule. But now one person's lies threatened to erase all of that goodwill. Finally, the evening of the HOA meeting arrived. Michael dressed neatly, wearing a clean shirt and pressed pants, hoping to present himself as calm and respectable. But inside, his nerves twisted like knots. He carried the folder of evidence under his arm as he walked to the small community hall where the meetings were held. The hall buzzed with chatter when he entered. Neighbors sat in folding chairs, some nodding to him politely, others avoiding his gaze. At the front, the HOA board members sat behind a long table with stacks of papers, and near the middle row, sitting tall with her arms crossed, was Karen. Her eyes met his, sharp and unyielding. She gave him the smallest smile, not of kindness, but of victory. Michael's heart pounded as he sat down. The meeting began with routine matters, budget updates, landscaping plans, small complaints about noise. Michael barely heard any of it. His mind was fixed on the moment when his name would be called. At last, the board chair cleared his throat. Next on the agenda is a matter concerning one of our residents, Mr. Michael. All eyes turned toward him. Michael stood slowly, clutching his folder tightly. The chair continued. A complaint was filed alleging that Mr. Michael engaged in disruptive behavior in a public place. Behavior that may reflect poorly on the image of our neighborhood. Before Michael could speak, Karen stood abruptly. Yes, I filed that complaint, she announced, her voice carrying across the hall. This man caused a disturbance at Walmart. He shouted at employees, tried to cheat the store, and even required police intervention. Do we want someone like that living here? Do we want our neighborhood represented by such behavior? Whispers filled the room. Some neighbors nodded, clearly swayed by her confident tone. Others looked uncertain, glancing between Karen and Michael. Michael's pulse raced. He knew this was the moment he had to defend himself. He stepped forward, opening his folder with shaking hands. Please, he began, his voice quiet but steady. That's not what happened. I want to tell you the truth. He explained everything from the beginning, the broken blender, the receipt, the polite conversation with the cashier, the sudden outburst from Karen. He described the police arriving and how they cleared him completely. He held up his receipt, his refund slip, and the note from the Walmart manager. These are the facts, he said firmly. I never shouted. I never cheated. The employees and the police can confirm that. The complaint against me is false. The room grew silent. Neighbors leaned forward, studying the papers he held. The board members whispered among themselves. Karen jumped to her feet again. Of course he has papers. Anyone can make up documents. But we all know what kind of people pretend to be innocent. I saw his behavior with my own eyes. He's lying to all of you. Michael turned to face her, his eyes filled with a mixture of sadness and quiet strength. Ma'am, you don't know me. You don't know my life. You judged me without reason, and you're trying to destroy my reputation with lies. But the truth is stronger. The truth is right here. The board chair raised a hand, silencing the room. We have heard both sides. We will review the evidence and make our decision. Michael returned to his seat, his heart still pounding. He had done everything he could. Now his fate rested in the hands of his neighbors. As the meeting moved on to other topics, Karen sat stiffly in her chair, her lips pressed into a thin line. Michael could feel her glare burning into him, but for the first time he felt a flicker of hope. He had spoken his truth. Whether or not the board believed him, he had stood up against the lies. And that, he realized, was the first step toward reclaiming his peace. The night after the HOA meeting, Michael could hardly sleep. His heart replayed every detail, from Karen's angry voice to the doubtful looks on his neighbors' faces. Even though he had shown his receipts and documents, he feared the board might still lean toward Karen's words. She had confidence, volume, and a way of twisting the story that made it sound believable. Michael lay in bed staring at the ceiling, wondering how far she would go. Was this about the blender? Or was it about power? She had tried to humiliate him at Walmart, and now she was trying to push him out of his own community. At dawn, as light slipped through his curtains, Michael made a decision. He would not wait quietly for the board to decide. He had been silent long enough. It was time to fight back, not with anger, but with truth. Gathering strength, the next morning Michael drove back to Walmart. The memory of that terrible day made his chest tighten, but he forced himself to walk through the doors. He approached the customer service counter, and to his relief, the same young cashier was working. She looked up and recognized him immediately. "Oh, it's you," she said softly. "I was so sorry about what happened last time. That woman was so unfair to you." Michael gave her a tired smile. "Thank you. I'm in some trouble now because of her. She filed a complaint with my neighborhood HOA. They think I caused a disturbance and they're considering action against me. I need help proving the truth." The cashier's eyes widened. "That's terrible. Of course I'll help. I saw everything. You were polite. You never raised your voice. I'll write a statement for you if you want." Michael felt a wave of relief. "Thank you. That would mean so much." The manager, hearing their conversation, came over as well. He had a calm authority that reassured Michael. "I'll write one too. I already told the police you did nothing wrong. I'll put it in writing so your neighbors can see it clearly." By the time Michael left Walmart, he had 2 signed statements in his folder, solid evidence that supported his words. He felt stronger than before, though a small shadow of worry still followed him. Karen was clever. She might twist even this against him. The weight of gossip over the next few days, Michael noticed how gossip spread like fire in dry grass. Some neighbors avoided him, whispering as he passed. Others seemed uncertain, torn between believing Karen or giving him the benefit of doubt. One evening, as Michael watered his plants, his next-door neighbor, Mr. Daniels, approached him. He was an older man with kind eyes who had lived in the neighborhood longer than anyone else. "Michael," he said in a gentle voice, "I've heard the talk. People are saying all sorts of things. But I don't believe them. I know you. You've been nothing but respectful here. If you ever need me to speak for you, I will." Michael felt his throat tighten with gratitude. "Thank you, sir. I may need that soon." Small sparks of support like this gave him hope. Not everyone believed Karen. Some people could still see through her act. Karen's campaigned, but Karen didn't rest. She seemed to double her efforts. Michael saw her standing in groups during the evenings, her hands waving dramatically as she told her story again and again. Sometimes she glanced at his house while speaking, her eyes cold and sharp. Michael wondered what lies she told. Did she say he shouted at children? Did she claim he was unstable? Each new story felt like another arrow shot at his character. One afternoon, while Michael was driving home, he passed Karen walking with two women from the neighborhood. He slowed his car politely, giving them space. Karen's voice rose on purpose. "People like him ruin communities. He pretends to be innocent, but he's dangerous. You'll see. The board will deal with him." The two women nodded, though one looked uncertain. Michael drove past, his jaw tight, fighting the urge to stop and argue. But he reminded himself, truth, not anger. The next meeting, the following week, the HOA called a second meeting to discuss the complaint further. Michael prepared carefully. He placed the new witness statements in his folder along with his original documents. He rehearsed his words, wanting to stay calm no matter what happened. When he entered the hall, the atmosphere was tense. The chairs filled quickly with neighbors, many curious to hear the drama unfold. Karen sat near the front, her arms folded, a smile that carried quiet triumph. The board chair opened the floor. "We will continue discussing the complaint regarding Mr. Michael. He has brought additional evidence. Mr. Michael, please present." Michael stood, his hand steady this time. He opened his folder and held up the statements. "These are written accounts from the Walmart staff who were present that day," he said clearly. "They confirm I was polite, that I never raised my voice, and that I followed all rules. They also confirm that the police found no wrongdoing. The complaint against me is false." He handed the papers to the board. The members read quietly, their brows furrowed. Whispers rippled through the room. Karen stood suddenly, her voice sharp. Of course he would get fake letters. Anyone can ask a friend to write lies for them. "Don't be fooled." The manager of Walmart had included his full name, store title, and phone number in the letter. The cashier had done the same. The board chair looked at Karen, his expression firm. "These are official. These can be verified. Do you still claim this is false?" Karen's face reddened slightly, but she raised her chin. "I know what I saw. He was dangerous. Maybe they're covering for him because they're afraid of him." Murmurs spread among the neighbors, some shaking their heads, others frowning. Michael spoke again, his voice stronger now. "I'm not dangerous. I've lived here for years. I've never caused trouble. I pay my dues. I respect my neighbors. The only thing I've done wrong is return a broken blender. That's all. And because of that, I was humiliated, accused, and now targeted here in my own neighborhood. I ask you to see the truth." The room grew still. People looked at him, not as a stranger anymore, but as someone speaking from the heart. A shift in the room for the first time. Karen's voice didn't dominate the space. Some neighbors who had once doubted Michael began nodding. Mr. Daniels raised his hand. "I've known Michael for years. He's never been rude, never caused harm. I believe him. And I think we should stop letting gossip decide people's fate." Others agreed. A woman near the back spoke up. "Karen, you've been spreading this story to everyone. But now we see proof. Maybe you judged too quickly." Karen's eyes darted around the room, searching for support. Her smile faltered. The board chair raised his voice. "We will deliberate and share our decision soon. But I must say, the evidence strongly favors Mr. Michael." Michael sat down, his heart racing with relief. He wasn't free yet, but the tide was turning. For the first time, Karen's grip on the room seemed to loosen. As the meeting ended, a few neighbors approached Michael quietly, shaking his hand, offering small words of support. Karen walked out quickly, her head held high but her steps sharp with anger. A breath of hope that night, Michael returned home under a sky full of stars. He stood on his porch, breathing in the cool air. The fear in his chest had not disappeared, but hope had joined it. He realized that lies could travel fast, but truth, once spoken with courage, could stand stronger. He still didn't know what Karen would do next. She was not the type to admit defeat easily. But he knew one thing: he was no longer alone. His neighbors were beginning to see him for who he truly was, and that gave him the strength to keep fighting. The week after the second HOA meeting felt long for Michael. Each day stretched like an endless road. He still saw Karen outside, talking to neighbors, but her voice no longer carried the same confidence. Her smile seemed thinner, her gestures sharper, as if she was fighting against an invisible wall that was closing in. Michael, on the other hand, felt lighter. The witness statements had changed everything. He still worried about the final decision, but now he walked through the neighborhood with his head held high. He greeted people, and slowly, they began greeting him back. Even children who once looked at him with shy suspicion waved at him when they rode their bikes past his house. For the first time in weeks, Michael felt like he belonged again, waiting for the decision. The HOA had promised to deliver a final decision within 7 days. During that time, Michael tried to live as normally as possible. He went to work, took care of his garden, and cooked simple meals in his kitchen. Yet every evening when he sat on his porch, his mind returned to the same question. What if they still side with Karen? The thought made his chest tighten. He had given everything he could: documents, receipts, witness statements, even his own heartfelt words. But deep inside, he knew Karen's influence was strong. On the 4th day, Mr. Daniels stopped by again. He carried a plate covered with foil. "I baked too much pie," the old man said with a kind smile. "Thought you could use a slice." Michael accepted the plate gratefully. "Thank you." "You didn't have to." Mr. Daniels leaned on the porch rail. "I just wanted to say, don't worry too much." People are opening their eyes. Karen may shout the loudest, but the truth is louder in the end. Those words gave Michael comfort. Karen's last push, but Karen wasn't done. On the 5th day, she slipped a letter into every mailbox in the neighborhood. Michael discovered it when he opened his own box that evening. The paper was bold, filled with dramatic words. She wrote that Michael was dangerous, that he lied to protect himself, that he was manipulating people with fake papers. She even claimed the witnesses from Walmart were probably bribed. Michael sighed as he read it. The lies no longer surprised him, but what struck him was how desperate she sounded. Her words carried less confidence and more panic, as if she could feel control slipping away. Some neighbors brought the letter to him, shaking their heads. "Don't worry, Michael," one said. "We know what this is. She's afraid." For the first time, Michael didn't feel like the victim of gossip. He felt like someone who had survived a storm and was now watching the clouds break apart. The final HOA meeting, at last, the 7th day arrived. The HOA board called one final meeting to announce their decision. The hall filled once again, neighbors gathering with curiosity and tension. Michael sat quietly near the front. His folder rested on his lap, though he knew he wouldn't need it now. Everything had been said. The truth was in plain sight. Karen entered late, her head high but her steps quick. She carried her letter in her hand, waving it for everyone to see. "The truth will come out tonight," she said loudly, trying to reclaim attention. The board chair called the meeting to order. His voice was calm but firm. "We have reviewed all documents, witness statements, and testimonies regarding the complaint against Mr. Michael. After thorough consideration, the board has reached a decision." The room fell silent. The chair looked directly at Michael. "We find no evidence that Mr. Michael caused any disturbance at Walmart or in this community. The complaint is dismissed. Mr. Michael remains a valued member of this neighborhood." Whispers erupted across the room. Some clapped softly. Others nodded in agreement. Relief washed over Michael like a gentle wave. His chest felt lighter than it had in weeks. Karen jumped to her feet. "You can't do this. You're ignoring the truth. He's tricking you all." The chair raised his hand. "Enough, Karen. You've had your chance to speak. The evidence is clear. Continuing to spread false accusations will not be tolerated. This community deserves peace." For the first time, Karen had no reply. Her mouth opened, then closed. She looked around the room, but the support she once commanded was gone. Neighbors avoided her eyes. Some even turned their backs. Vindication. After the meeting, neighbors approached Michael. Some shook his hand, others patted his shoulder. "You handled yourself with dignity," one said. "You didn't deserve what she put you through," another added. Michael thanked them all, his voice thick with emotion. For weeks he had felt alone, fighting against shadows of gossip and lies. Now he stood in the light, surrounded by people who finally saw him clearly. Karen stormed out of the hall, her footsteps echoing sharply. She didn't look back. A community restored. In the days that followed, the neighborhood grew calmer. The gossip that once circled around Michael now faded like smoke in the wind. People waved at him when he walked by. Children laughed in the streets again, no longer warned by their parents to stay away. Mr. Daniels visited often, bringing stories of the past and teaching Michael small tips for gardening. A family down the street invited him for dinner, saying they wanted to get to know him better. Michael's house, once heavy with silence, began to feel warm again. Karen's silence, as for Karen, she withdrew. She no longer stood at the corner speaking loudly. She stopped attending board meetings for a while. Some neighbors said she was embarrassed. Others believed she was simply planning her next move. But for Michael, it didn't matter. He had learned something important. Her voice didn't control him anymore. A lesson in strength. One quiet evening, Michael sat on his porch with a cup of tea. The sky was painted with the soft colors of sunset. He thought about everything that had happened. The blender, the police call, the HOA meetings, the lies, the gossip, and finally, the truth. It had been exhausting, painful, and at times almost unbearable. But it had also taught him something. He had learned that silence could be mistaken for weakness. But when spoken at the right time, truth had more power than any lie. He had learned that communities could be fragile, but also strong, if people were willing to listen and see with open eyes. Most of all, he had learned that even in the face of false accusations, dignity and patience could win. The closing moment, as night settled in, Michael smiled to himself. The fear was gone, replaced by peace. He no longer worried about being forced out of his home. His neighbors respected him again. His community was healing. Karen might never admit her wrongs, but that didn't matter. What mattered was that the truth had been seen and it had set him free. Michael lifted his cup in the quiet evening and whispered to himself, "Truth always wins." And in that moment, he felt whole again.